I no longer work for Monticello College. And that is a bit of a change considering I moved my entire family down here to the thriving metropolis of Monticello to work at Monticello College. And the reason I came down is because I believe very strongly in the mission of this alternative school, which is to train leaders through a mixture of liberal arts education and self-reliance training. How to live off-grid, how to grow some of your own food, how to make soap and take care of the solar panels and live thriftily. Those are values that I aspire to and believe are very strong. And, I run a channel called Good and Basic. I am interested in both philosophy, liberal arts training, and Georgics, which is the term coined by the school to represent all the self-reliance, how to make stuff from scratch aspects of the curriculum. So the vision I believed in very, very much. And my role over the course of the last year and a half has been to make the school match that vision, to try to promote that vision. And I've taught economics and history and philosophy, and I've taught value theory and logic, and I've taught blacksmithing, and I've taught construction, and I've taught all kinds of stuff. And tried to share as much of my character, values, and insight as I possibly could. But the environment of the school was toxic and hypocritical. One of the key texts that forms the backbone of the school is one called A Thomas Jefferson Education. Frequently it's referred to as TJ Ed in the community of people who really like the book. And one of the principles in that book is teach how to think, not what to think. Unfortunately, the director of the school, Shannon Brooks, is very, very committed to a neoconservative philosophy that is anti-vaccine and anti-5G and a little bit kooky dukes. And the environment that he has created on the campus does not encourage inquiry, it doesn't encourage exploration. It encourages a form of dogma. And there's not a lot of privacy on the college, and it ended up feeling a little bit oppressive, almost like a cult. So even though I had good experiences there, some of which I will eventually share here on the channel, of good classes that I taught and good experiences that I had, good discussions, many, many good interactions with the students who for the most part came out of a desire to learn in a very alternative environment. But it has been time for me to leave. And that has got me thinking about the virtues of disloyalty. At the beginning of this year, I had already kind of decided that I needed to leave, but I hadn't figured out my timetable. So I told Shannon, the director, I'm going to leave at the end of the year. And I also promised him under no circumstances would I leave before the end of the year. Well, the year came, I wouldn't leave him hanging. I would fulfill my contract, is what I told him. So I was an independent contractor, and as the first semester went on, the toxicity level in the environment was enough to make me say, okay, I need to be gone, I need to be done. So my wife and I found a property that we wanted to move out to start our own hobby farm, our own homestead. And we got ready to move, and I prepared to subcontract my work so that I could fulfill my contract while not being present. And when I proposed that to Shannon, he kind of freaked out. He called me a man of no honor, among other things, and then told me that that plan was absolutely unacceptable and said he wanted to terminate my contract. At which point I told him, I am not asking for your permission. I'm an independent contractor and this is what's happening. But if you do want to terminate my contract, you have a choice between having an online second-year instructor and no second-year instructor for the second-year curriculum, which is what I was teaching. And he said, well, in that case, I'd rather have none. So he terminated my contract, and my instant feeling was relief. So, finished oral exams the next day, proctoring those, and then I left. And for the last 3 months, I've been pretty much unemployed, trying to sort out my next steps in life. And the bizarre thing is, I don't regret the decision at all. It is a virtue to be loyal. It is a virtue to stick with something through thick and thin, like a marriage, or devotion to a church, or devotion to a nation, or devotion to a civic society or to your parents or to whatever else, to a friend. There is much virtue in loyalty, and we talk a lot about that virtue. There is a principle in Aristotle that pretty much any virtue can become a vice, and pretty much any vice can become a virtue. If it's all about doing the right thing at the right time. There is a time, as the Bible says, to kill and a time to die. There's a time to live, there's a time to plant, there's a time to practice nonviolence like Gandhi, and there's a time to practice revolution like George Washington. It is a mix. It's about knowing when. And knowing when to get out of a toxic relationship and to be appropriately disloyal is a real trick. I think it's important to know how to say no. It's important to be just a little bit of a curmudgeon, or at least be capable of that. I think it's important to be kind most of the time. And even, what would you say, acquiescing, like generally willing to play nice with the other kids. It's incredibly important. It's a valuable, virtuous thing. But it also is important to be able to say no, arbitrarily. One of the drills that I did with my students, I taught a martial arts class every morning. I've been a martial arts instructor on and off for the last 12, 13 years, since I was about 17. And I've taught at a university level and a high school level. I've taught in a few different venues. But one of the exercises I had my students do, one of the most useful drills for self-defense, is learning how to set a verbal boundary. You'd think that martial arts is all about fists and punches and kicks, but those are pretty taboo, and violence of that kind should never be your first resort. So it's very helpful to learn a few things in between nice, friendly relations and the necessity to punch and kick somebody, such as how to set a verbal boundary. So we practiced having somebody creeping up on you, invading your space. And what do? That in this exercise, the answer was to say, back off, in a way that showed that you meant it. And one of the things I had my students do with that was do not, under any circumstances, give reasons. Don't say back off or I'll punch you in the head. Don't say back off or I'll call the cops. Don't say back off and then give some kind of threat. I'm a black belt in 4 different martial arts or whatever. Just say back off. No reasons, just the boundary. And then if they encroach on the boundary further, make it obvious that you mean it with a mixture of body language and voice. And that is a very valuable skill. When you feel that something is inappropriate and you can't quite express why, it is incredibly important to be able to set the boundary and say, no, I'm not going to do it. I had an incident like that where Shannon was asking me to, it was a dumb thing. I was lifting stakes, clearing out an old pig pen and removing a fence, and he wanted me to use the tractor, and he said, you will use it. Gave it as a command with a fair amount of social pressure, and I said, I'm not doing it. And at the time, I couldn't quite express why. Turns out I was not comfortable using the backhoe that close to students who would be working in front of the backhoe. So I didn't want to risk injuring a student. But I couldn't quite articulate why I was uncomfortable, so I just said, I'm not doing it. And that created some, discord. He took it as being defiant, which is an indicator, and I stuck by my boundary. And I didn't use the backhoe until I felt comfortable with it personally. So, which was quite a bit later and not for that task. So, I've left Monticello College. I'm going to share some stuff about positives that I had with the environment. I do not recommend that students go to the college. I don't think it's a particularly healthy thing. One of the things that is slightly cult-like about the college is that the curriculum and Shannon preach is probably the right word, that they are the only acceptable college solution. Like if you go to any other, that you're buying into a corrupt system and you're participating in the enemy, and there's quite a bit of them thinking with other universities, which is extremely unhealthy. I mean, I've gone to more than 7 years of college, and it's been good. So don't recommend it. I love the vision, love the idea. I wish it had turned out. Maybe they'll turn it around and make it something good. But in the meantime, I'm out. I'm not participating anymore.
Guys, come stand by me.
And that's the end.